Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today for our last panel session today, exploring best practices, visual art and inclusion in the UK. I'm going to introduce you both briefly, and then we'll jump in. Um, I'll start by maybe just contextualizing a little bit what we talked about. We had a little discussion already last week to talk about the things that we wanted to raise today. We've already talked quite a lot today during the course of the seminar about how inclusion in the arts seems to be a little bit more advanced in the UK than in many other countries, including Germany. And what we're interested in with this panel is to understand what we can learn from British initiatives that have set out to promote inclusion in the visual arts in particular. What have they already achieved? What hurdles are they currently facing? And what they can give us along the way. So, without further ado, we have here today Sheryll Catto, Artistic Director and CEO of ActionSpace in London, an organisation who work with learning disabled artists across London as a creative hub, supported studio and artist development agency. They are supported by Arts Council England. Sheryll joined ActionSpace initially as co-director in 2008, having worked in the creative sector for over 25 years, and was attracted to ActionSpace because of their commitment to providing learning disabled artists with the same opportunities as their peers in the contemporary visual arts sector. Julie Lomax is CEO of AN, the Artists Information Company, also in London. AN are the Artists Advocate, or the Artists Advocate, I should say. Guided by their members and advised by their Arts Council, they campaign on crucial issues from fair pay to intellectual property, ensuring that artists' voices are heard, and shaping policy at the highest level. Open to every artist, their inclusive, open-minded community connects members to the services and opportunities they need to thrive, empowering them to make change for the better. With more than 20 years director-level experience in arts organisations and national funding bodies, Julie is a dedicated champion of artists and their role in the world, and I'm really delighted to have you both here. And I think we'll just jump straight in. Perhaps we can just start, if you could both give just a little visual description before you start talking, and maybe just explain a little bit more about your work, in particular with artists with disabilities, and what that looks like for each of you. I think maybe Sheryll, if it's okay, we'll start with you first.
Hey, hello. Thank you for inviting me, and enormous apologies for my lack of being able to speak in German. I'm always really embarrassed when I go to other countries that everyone can speak English and I can't speak any other languages, but I will try to speak very slowly. I'm a Black woman of advanced age, and I have very short graying natural hair. I am, as Catherine said, I'm the artistic director and CEO of ActionSpace. We are a London-based organization, and we support learning disabled artists to develop and sustain creative practices, successful creative practice. We always say that our aim is to seek out and unlock talent and to create bespoke opportunities for learning disabled artists to reach their potential. We have a very artist centered approach. We're not a teaching organization. We don't collaborate. We don't co create. It's about facilitating and enabling the artists to supporting our artists to be who they want to be and to make the artwork that they want to make. We have 3 studios in London, which means that we're accessible because London's a very big city. And for most of our artists, traveling is challenging. It's very frustrating. It causes a lot of tension. So we want to be where the artists are so they can get to us very easily. We run a program of weekly supported studio sessions where the artists come in. We provide them with studio facilities, with artwork, with materials, art materials, and equipment, and creative mentoring. And really, they can do whatever they want to do. We have a team of 8 specialist artist facilitators. They work on a one-to-one basis with each artist. They help them to develop new skills, to try and experiment with new things, to develop and sort of express their ideas, and just to figure out what they want their practice to be. And we're completely not prescriptive about that. For some, it will be a private practice, something that's theirs in a life where they don't have an awful lot of agency and they're constantly told what to do. It'll be about having a meaningful activity that they can look forward to during the week. It'll be about a way of expressing themselves, because a lot of our artists are nonverbal. Probably about 80% have limited verbal skills, but they are visual thinkers and visual processors. And for some, it's just about having a community. We found very much during the pandemic lockdowns that what a lot of our artists missed the most was the social support circle of coming in and having friends that they could share things with and that they could communicate with. They Longevity is a really important one. So they come in once or twice a week. It's always on the same day. It's with the same group, and they're working with the same facilitator. Many of our artists have been with us for a good 20 or 25 years. That's really important because it takes a while for them to feel comfortable with us, to feel safe, to feel that they're in a place where they're respected and they can do what they want to do. It takes a while for the facilitator to learn how to communicate with them, and to sort of, particularly for our artists who are nonverbal, to be able to pick up on when they're happy with something and they're not happy with something. So the time is really important. And for any artist, it takes a while to develop your practice. And you have good days and bad days. You have good months and bad months. But the longevity means that you're able to roll through that. Once they have, well, for others, it'll be about having a professional practice. And we're finding that with some of the younger people coming in who didn't go through a period in time where learning disabled people were institutionalized, they are coming in with a lot of ambition. They're coming in knowing that they want to be artists, knowing that they want their work to be exhibited, they want to sell work, they want to be part of the sector, they want to be doing residencies and doing everything else everyone else in the sector is. And we're actually really quite excited that that's the way things are going. Once they hit that level, we manage their practices. So we enable them to find opportunities. We support them to do submissions to open call exhibitions, to apply for grants and things like that. And then we support them in delivering whatever opportunities come up. We're currently working with about 70 artists on a weekly basis. They're at all points in their career. We're particularly getting artists, young people who are coming out of education and transferring into adult life, which is a really difficult period for any young person, but particularly difficult for young people with disabilities because they sort of fall off a cliff. They have, in school, they have a schedule, they know what they're doing every day, and then suddenly they wake up the next September and there's nothing and they don't know what they're doing. So often we're supporting them through that transition. We also have a number of artists who've been with us for a long time and have very established practices. So we have, in particular, Naina Kaulu, who was part of Manifesta 15 in Barcelona last year, and currently has an exhibition that recently opened about last week at Kunst, statt in Norway, and will be there until the 3rd of August. We also have Andrew Omeding, who had a solo exhibition at Camden Art Centre in London last year and was employed over the last academic year by Tate Galleries to deliver, as an artist educator, to deliver a program of workshops, gallery workshops for SEND schools. And that was really amazing. We got such good feedback from teachers who said, it was a wonderful opportunity to bring our young people, our students with learning disabilities, and have someone teaching them who was really like them a few years on, and gave them the idea that we can dream, we could do this in the future. So as I said, our whole aim is to support our artists to be who they want to be and do what they want to do. We're very known for creating divas, I'm very happy to say, because people will often say to us, well, don't they just tell you, do what you tell them to? And I can happily say that we don't have one single artist who would ever do anything that we told them to do if they didn't want to do it. And well, they shouldn't. So that's us in a nutshell.
Thanks, Sheryl. That's a fantastic description of what you do. I'd really love to come back to quite a few points that you raised already, but let's pass over to Julie. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about AN and the work that you do there?
Hi, everybody. Guten Tag. I did study German at school, but sadly, it's quite a difficult language. So I didn't do very well. But that might be because I didn't really do very well in many subjects because I actually ended up being in very much in that bracket where the place where I expressed myself was in the art classroom at school. My name's Julie Lomax. I'm the CEO of AN, the Artists Information Company. I'm a, well, I was 60 last 2 weeks ago, and I've got long blonde hair. I'm wearing a black shirt, and I'm white, and I've got red lipstick on. So just let me tell you a little bit about AN, and we are referred to as AN really in the UK because the A and the N stands for Artist Newsletter. So back in 1980, when there was no mobile phones, no internet, people got their information through probably flyers or newsletters, that type of thing. A group of artists in Sunderland in the northeast of England set up an organisation to actually produce a newsletter, artist newsletter. And the kind of very simple mission behind that was to support visual artists. So it was really artists supporting other artists. So fast forward 45 years, we've actually evolved from being a 500 copy per month newsletter to a professional membership organisation for artists and also freelancers working in the visual arts sector. And we also have students as members who are studying creative courses. And we have over 33,000 members. We're probably going to hit the 34,000 members mark very shortly because 2 days ago we were 33,900 members, and we cover the whole of the UK. The majority of our members are artists. And because of that DNA of AN, we really were set up and set about supporting artists who are not part of the mainstream art world. And this has continued throughout our evolution to where we are now. And we've also always supported artists who have faced barriers and challenges in terms of being able to be professional practicing artists. And so that really sort of sets the scene for where we are today. And Sheryl Berman, who was an artist and quoted looking back at the 1980s and said this about AN. AN was aware of race, class, and gender and issues of cultural diversity. It felt like one of the only organisations we had to guide or support us. So we've kept that as part of the work that we do now. And what we do now is we provide services and also different membership benefits to our members, which empower them to thrive. And in thinking about how we very specifically work with artists with disabilities, right from the top of the organisation, and that's through our leadership mechanism. So that's through the board of AN and also our Artists Council. We've got neurodiverse and disabled artists on our board. And that's really important because what that does is really change up how the organisation is led and run. And then we also, on a monthly basis, we do what is called Q&As, so questions and answers, basically an interview. And through that, we put a spotlight on artist practices. And again, we put a spotlight on disabled artist practices as part of that. And really importantly for us, especially in thinking about the artist community. There are very, as we know now, very high levels of neurodiversity within the artist community. And we're really lucky to have Sonia Bouet on our board and Sarah Francis on our Artist Council, who have been very active in this area and who are both neurodiverse themselves. And they are very much informing the work that we do. We also support artists to be able, disabled artists to be able to engage in the services that we provide. So, for instance, we have an annual bursary program where artists can apply to us for very small amounts of money for professional development. But as part of that program, we have funding available that we can make available for artists who are disabled, neurodiverse, DDEF, to actually make their applications so that they can actually work with somebody like a support worker to actually help them make their applications. And also those grants, we offer additional funding within those very small bursaries for disabled artists for their own access costs. So that's on top of the money that we might give through our bursary scheme. We also ensure that all of our events, so we do a lot of events which are around professional development for artists. And in fact, most of our programme actually falls into either supporting artists' creative practice, supporting the business of being an artist. As many of you know, if you're artists, there's a lot of administration involved in being an artist, and that business side, which of course Sheryll has beautifully described in the way that you know, they support their artists, and also leadership. So we do, you know, our events fall around, you know, one of those areas, but we make sure that our events are accessible and that, you know, they're signed. And we're really interested actually in how AI in the future will be able to aid access. So we'll be having a big discussion later this year around the ethical use of AI and in the future. We're actually at the moment going through a huge piece of work, which is to develop a new website, visual identity, and also a completely new brand for AN. And all of that work has been guided by our artists with disabilities who are on our Artist Council and also on our board and as part of the membership. And in doing that, we're looking at accessibility standards, so very specific resources to ensure that our website is fully accessible. And also really right from the start, from the design start of the new visual identity, access has been built in. We also, you know, all of our events are mainly provided by artists for artists. And so most of the people that work for AN on a freelance capacity are artists. So again, we build in, we ask people who are coming to work for us whether they have an access rider so that we can actually work with them. And make sure that their needs and the way we work with them is in a way that actually works for them. And I'm actually having a really interesting conversation at the moment with our disability equality group around what they would term CRIP time, which is recovery time. And so how do we build in recovery time into the roles that we have in our organisation? And then we've done a very big piece of work around well-being, and that's we've had sessions online, but also through a programme that we have called Assembly. And what's interesting about that is we always learn something new. And last year I learned about something that I'd never heard of before, which was one of our artists that was actually organising Assembly for us, actually asked us for a budget for mental health first aider, and I didn't even know what this was. But as I went back to my artist council, and we found out that several of our artist council were actually trained mental health first aiders. So I like to think that we're a learning organisation. We keep that in we're artist led, by the way, as I should have said that right at the beginning. And as part of that learning, we are there to support our artists, all of our members. And also, very particularly, we have put in, different things to make sure that we're actually supporting our disabled artist members as well.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm really glad you mentioned access riders because we touched on that earlier and introduced our public to the concept of access riders. And it's really good to hear how you use that. We sort of heard from the artist side how artists use access riders. It's really good to hear from your perspective as a representative organization, how you use it then as a tool to work with the artists that you work with. I wanted to ask you both about the role that cultural policy and funding structures play for both of you. That's always a very hot topic over here, of course, and I think when we spoke last, I think I was complaining to you both about the budget cuts here in Berlin, and of course, in the UK, you've been through several different austerity measures in the last couple of decades. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about what role cultural politics and funding structures play, and maybe if you can talk a little bit about the importance of sustainability or the sustainability of what you do. Sheryll, do you want to maybe start?
Yeah, we keep saying that we're non-campaigning, and we try really hard. I endlessly say, oh, but we're just an arts organization. But by necessity, we have to get involved in policy. We sit in the arts world, and we also sit in the disability and social care world. And we really can't get away from that because all of our artists come to us sitting in both of those worlds. And we endlessly get involved with having to help parents find funding for things and all sorts of things like that. We do a lot of art sector development. As with anywhere, I mean, it was really funny to hear you say at the beginning that we're so far ahead. I suppose we're ahead, but we're not nearly as ahead as we would like to be. So we do a lot of work sitting on panels and getting involved in roundtables and things like that, because very sadly, there's still a problem with having our artists' work being seen as work. And not being seen as, when we call a new gallery or we get in touch with a new partner, we instantly get transferred to the community team or the learning and engagement team, which is really great because we want them to be engaging with learning disabled people more so that they have more opportunities. But we're working with artists, so we also want to talk to the cultural teams and the curators about showing the work. What our artists want is their work to be shown, because by their work being shown, it means that they're involved in the discussions that are having out in the world. That's them saying, this is what I think about this. They're all intersectional. That's one of the frustrations, that often they get pegged as you're disabled or you're learning disabled, so you have nothing to say about social justice or about racial equality or anything like that, which is not at all true. And their work is saying all of that, and their work is their ability to say that. So that's one of the reasons for having their work shown. Everything that we do is in partnership. We're really, really key on the idea that we don't want our artists to be othered, and we don't want them to be outsiders, and we don't want to be creating work that sits over there and isn't part of the sort of contemporary canon. So we work a lot. All of our studios are situated within studios with other artists. So we're at Studio Voltaire in South London, we're at Cockpit Arts in Central London, and we're at an artist studio group in North London. We have relationships with all of those. We're very much part of the community in all of those. We wander in and out of studios with all of the other artists that are around us. We work a lot with the Royal Academy, with the British Museum, as I mentioned, Camden Art Centre, also smaller galleries like Autograph. We're part of the Contemporary Visual Arts Network. I personally am a member of AN. We haven't. We need to do an organizational membership, but we'll get on to that. But we use all of your facilities, and we refer to. In fact, I had out the guide to paying artists and exhibitions yesterday, which I was waving in front of someone who was trying to pay our artist too small an artist fee for their exhibition. We're absolutely dedicated to making the cultural sector. More diverse, more inclusive, and not just saying that in a really, really want a way. You know, as I said, our main thing is to make sure that our artists have the same opportunities of all the rest of the artists in the sector and all of their peers. Funding, where can I start? I mean, you can't get away from it. We do get core funding from the Arts Council, but obviously we're all, you know, the Arts Council has different priorities. They're changing all the time because it comes down from government. We're always afraid of what's going to happen there. We do charge session fees. These are highly subsidized. Most of the artists who come to us pay their session fees through their social care budgets, which come from local councils. Local councils are all in big trouble. We work across 15 different local councils in London. 6 of those are in danger of going bankrupt at the moment. So social care budgets are being cut. People who previously would have qualified for social care are now getting assessed as not being eligible for social care. So that's feeding into that. We actually haven't been able to put our session fees up for the last 15 years. So that means that we are very, very reliant on fundraising from trusts and foundations to make up the difference. We do have a fundraising, ahead of fundraising, trust and foundations, that the call on them is getting bigger and bigger. We're often fundraising against food banks and, you know, frontline care providers. We're looking into personal giving and donations and commercial sponsorships, but so is everyone. Um, Sustainability, as I said before, the thing that's most important for our artists is that they have a lot of time and they can come to us year in and year out, and they can rely on the fact that they can come in and year out. I just see that as our job, really. That's for us to make sure that that happens. That's me.
Thank you. Wow, so much. And Julie, what about maybe you can start with the financial structure of AN and then how you also work within the cultural political landscape in the UK.
Yeah, so I think what's really important in terms of the business model, which is very different, is that we do get Arts Council funding as well. But that's also just quite a small amount. So it's around 19% of our overall turnover. And our main turnover is obviously membership fees. But we also haven't put our fees up for over 10 years because we believe, you know, that to keep those as affordable as possible for artists. And in fact, what we have been able to do is introduce new membership benefits without putting fees up, which is great. And within the money that comes in, we do return 60% of that back to members. That's like our that's our internal policy. But one of the things that I think is really interesting, I think, for this audience is that we created an access budget line. So within our budgets, we've got a budget line whereby anybody in the organisation can use that budget line if they are organising an event or if they are going and doing a Q&A with perhaps a particular artist where they might need, yes, say a BSL, British Sign Language interpreter, or anything like that. And within this access budget line, which I think is really interesting, is that we generally spend it, but this year we're coming up to the end of the financial year, we haven't actually fully spent it. And that budget line, and a lot of organisations think, oh, that's great that you're able to have an access budget line. It's 2.5% of our overall turnover. And for that small investment, it makes such a big difference. It empowers the team that I work with to be able to say to somebody, yes, of course, we can provide that for you. And it also makes a massive difference to those artists, that disabled artists that we're probably, that we're interacting with. And then in terms of the way that we are structured internally, we're just about to go live with a new strategic plan for 5 years, and access and is built into every single goal. So our goals are member-centered and accessible. That's one of our goals. Of course, we would want to be member-centered. We're a membership organisation. Advocacy, we do a lot of advocacy, and I'll talk about that in a second. We do talk about growing the organisation, but in growing the organisation, it's about transforming the organisation. So ensuring that that we're not just doing kind of growth for growth's sake, that as we grow, that we're actually absolutely taking care of those artists that, as I said, are experiencing, challenges or barriers to being able to practice. That might be due to disability, it might be due to race, class, gender, many different things. And as Sheryll said, they're not, they're not kind of mutually exclusive. They're actually intersect with each other. And then also, I've talked about our digital transformation. That's one of our goals. And also the way that we work. So, being kind of nationally a national organisation and also a local organisation and international. We've got a disability equality group, as I've mentioned before, from our board and artists council. And it's called this because it's a political thing to call a disability equality group. What is generally referred to in the UK around this type of work, it's generally referred to as, and this is the acronym, EDI, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. But what we've done at AN is we've actually said, no, actually, we really need to take action on disability. So it's absolutely an active group. And it comes from really that point of, if you organise, then you can activate, and then you can also, make a difference. But you need a space to organise in where you feel safe and you feel like you are with the people that actually you can talk to. And that really comes as well from the fact that I have got a background as well in activism. And then we have a programme framework. So we don't make decisions on our programme without looking at the programme framework, which does actually, include, that kind of, that very broad-based terms, equality, diversity and inclusion. And I think one of the things that is really an unsung moment in the history of Arts Council England, and the reason I can talk about it is I did used to be the director of visual arts at Arts Council England, so I was the director of visual arts for London, is that there was a moment in the 2000s where Arts Council England kind of woke up to the fact that if audiences didn't change, if organisations didn't change their audiences and who engages with them, they're going to get left behind. And so part of that work was actually to bring in what was then called, I think they were called equality action plans. And really, in like making organizations do these equality action plans, you know, whether they sat on a shelf in some organizations and action wasn't taken, what it was a real first step, I feel, in making organizations stop, make you think about what you're doing, measure what you're doing, and then improve. And I think that because this happened in, as I said, it was kind of like the mid 2000s. I joined Arts Council in 2003. I remember having the job of actually explaining to organisations what these equality action plans were and to boards. And that was quite a difficult moment. But actually, people got on with it and thought, well, actually, that's a really good idea. This is why we need to do this. You know, they kind of woke up to it, as well as, you know, Arts Council England doing that. And I think that that did make a difference. And it certainly made, even if it's only small differences, it's made small differences in the way that they fund the portfolio. And who does get that regular funding. It's called National Portfolio Organisation funding in the UK. And also it changed how they made their grants through the National Lottery funds. So I think, you know, that was a sort of unsung, quiet moment that has just, it really has embedded itself within organisations. And I think where it probably hasn't embedded itself as much as it should do is around leadership, and in the organisations. But it, you know, I think it was a positive thing to do, even if it was a hard sell at the time. I know I was there, I was doing the sell. Actually, it did correspond with a very big bank in the UK having quite a popular advert on TV with the singing bank manager who was black. And so with a few organisations that were a little bit difficult, I said, well, I'm afraid if that bank is marketing and has a black bank manager in the advert, there is an audience out there. There are customers out there. And these are customers that perhaps you don't know yet, who you could have in your organisation. So I've probably just given away a big secret there. But yeah, I did use that sell to a couple of organisations, those that heavily relied on individual donations. And then finally, I think one of the things that we do, Sheryll has talked about working in partnership. We work very closely with the Contemporary Visual Arts Network and DAX, which is the Visual Arts Copyright Agency in the UK. And we are the secretariat for what is called an all-party parliamentary group for visual arts and artists. And all-party parliamentary groups are, as you can, as they say, it's MPs and parliamentarians from the House of Lords coming together because they've got an interest in the visual arts. And we support them in that interest and are able, obviously, to do things like present research to them, help them with questions in Parliament, etc. And so that's, you know, kind of quiet and behind the scenes, but has, again, a very big impact.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's funny that you mentioned the action plans, the equality action plans, because that's exactly what Berlinclusion started doing about 7 years ago when we first started advising Berlin-based arts organizations here, and introducing that idea of, well, actually you can look at your whole arts organization and look at how you're responding to discrimination, how you can dismantle barriers, not just for people with disabilities, but people who are discriminated against or marginalized people in all areas. I know we've got an audience here of very interested people who probably have a million questions to ask you both. We don't have time for a million questions, but we do have time for a few questions, I think. So I'm going to take some questions from the audience here. We've got our microphones so that you can hear them. And if anyone is brave and would like to come up and be on camera and let yourself be seen, then...
Oh, on camera? Well, I'm just going to ask from here, yes.
Go
Hello,
ahead.
Julie. Hello, Sheryl. This is Constanze speaking here from IGBK. Um, we've met before, Julie and Sheryl. We've met also briefly at the Res Artis conference 2023, which was really
Yeah.
wonderful. And I'm so great to see you here. And it's so enriching to hear what you are doing, the work in the UK. And my question is to Julie specifically. Because Julie, when we met last time in Vilnius, there were also many members of your Artist Council present. And I found this really particularly interesting and helpful for us, or as an association, to have such an Artist Council. I think maybe for us in Germany, it's just an imagination I have, it could help us a lot. It could help a lot to be able to have new input coming in, to work out new strategies. And I'm really interested really structurally. How did you implement this Artist Council? What is the role of it? What can it do? And so on. That would be great.
Hi, Constance. Lovely to hear you. Yeah, with the Artists Council, it's actually something I inherited. So I started. I've been with the organisation with AN for 6 years, and there's always been, as I've said, AN was started by artists for artists, and it was a newsletter. And then somewhere along its history, a group of artists said to AN, you know, it'd be really great if you could start to provide services for artists. And that actually started the Artists Council. So that was quite some time ago. And then when I came into post in 2018, there'd just been a review of Artists Council and how it might work into the future. And one of the first things I put in place is that open recruitment for Artists Council. So our Artists Council consists of 15 artists who are drawn from the membership of AN. We have an open recruitment process. We within that open recruitment process, we ask for we're really recruiting from all different types of practice, all different types of backgrounds, regions so where they might be in the UK, and also at different stages in their career. And what we find really valuable about that is they have an advisory role. So they're not a board. So they're not a board in the sense that our board has the legal and financial responsibility for the organisation. They have an advisory role that is really embedded in the work that we do. So, for instance, the current Artists Council has suggested that we should really create a handbook on how we work with freelancers, and that's stemmed out of their Access Working Group. And, you know, other things that have come, and very practical things as well. Our last Artists Council did a series of podcasts called Artists and Money, you know, how to make money. And they're great. They're these conversations between artists about how they make their money, both from their art practice, but also from the other things that they do. So they are involved in the very practical stuff. They're involved in informing our work and telling us what we need to do in order to continue to be relevant as an organisation. As an organisation for artists, if we're not relevant to artists, then we pretty much should just shut up shop. But also very critically over the last 2 years, as we've been moving towards the new visual identity, new brand, strategic plan, and also our new website, they are actively involved in that policy making and informing that work as we go along. So they are very embedded in the work that we do. And we also think it's very important that because they play that role, oh, and by the way, we do obviously pay them for doing that role as well, as we are able to pay our board as well. And in doing that, I think we learn a lot, but also the kind of we're also, in a sense, developing the next group of leaders within the sector. And we offer our Artists Council leadership training through the Claw Leadership here in the UK, and that's really important.
Any other questions?
Thank you. I should have said I've stopped there. Yes, so thank you, Constance, for that question.
Thanks, Julie. You didn't see, but Sue was holding up the microphone for anybody to ask any questions. Any other questions? Otherwise, I have a small one. Maybe just to finish up then, this panel. And thank you so much for all of your really rich contributions. It's, you know, it amazes me how many organizations there are in the UK, even if they're not disability specific organizations, but generally just so many organizations that serve the needs of artists, but do it in a really accessible and inclusive way and have it already on their radar that that's just part and parcel of what you do when you work in the visual arts in the UK. So thank you for sharing the insight of how complex and far-reaching that is. Maybe just to finish up, I would really love to know, what advice would you give generally to artists associations or artist organizations, maybe even those in the making here in Germany, in terms of how they can best serve disabled artists, and maybe just in like 1 or 2 sentences? Sorry, that's going to be really hard. Sheryll,
Do you want me to go?
would
Do
you
you
like
want me
to
to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
First, fight fear. Really, the biggest problem, the biggest barrier and block our artists have is fear. Other organizations are afraid of doing something wrong, of insulting anyone, and that just makes me so cross, because I think while you're doing that, people aren't getting opportunities. We make mistakes on a daily basis, and we're constantly making mistakes. We're constantly saying the wrong thing. All you do is you apologize, you learn from your mistakes, and you move forward. And the second thing is just being really honest. As you said, artist writers, really important on both sides. You need to sit down. First of all, you have to start with the right artist for the right project. It can't be a box ticking. It has to be, this is the artist that needs to be doing this project. This is the organization that needs to be working with that artist. You both sit down, do an access writer on both sides. This is what we need. This is what you need. Just as an example, when we worked with Tate, with Andrew running the gallery program for them, we first talked to them about 5 years ago, and we sat down and said, this is what Andrew would need to be able to do that. They just didn't have the budget or the structure to be able to do it. We both said, this isn't going to work, let's walk away. 5 years later, they came back and said, no, we really want to do this. So when we were planning this year, we put all of those things in place so we can do it. So that's my 2 things: fight the fear and be honest on both sides, and recognize that there's going to be budget involved.
Amazing. Thank you, Sheryll. Yeah, I think that deserves a round of applause. Julie, what are your words of wisdom that we can finish this panel on? I know you have them.
Well, I mean, it's not very different, really, to what Sheryll said. To quote a famous sportswear brand campaign, just do it. You'll get it right. You'll get it wrong. And do it in the spirit of learning, because you can learn a lot from each other. And also, it's not wrong to set yourself targets. A lot of people think, oh, I can't possibly do that because, is that sort of paying, lip service? Is that appropriate? Whatever. No, you can set yourself targets. And, when I think about when we were recruiting our board, we wanted to reflect our values and ambitions on diversity and inclusion. And so we didn't do a who do we know, because you're just going to get more of the same. We had an open and welcome recruitment process, and we did guarantees for disabled candidates. And by the way, guaranteed interviews. And by the way, I know that that's controversial in itself, but however, it's a first step. And then I just want to finish on a very heartwarming moment, which happened in Berlin, where again, just do it, you'll get it right, you'll get it wrong. My friend and I, a couple of years ago, visited Hamburger Bahnhof, and we got to a point in the exhibition where we realized that we couldn't get to the next step of it because something had broken within the building. And we just asked somebody, and the person the invigilator then found somebody from the offices who came, and we were actually taken through a completely different route so that we could visit the other part of the exhibition. And they were very apologetic because obviously, they didn't want to be seen to, have not actually done the right thing for my disabled friend. But actually, we were both delighted. And she then wrote to, because I knew who the directors were, wrote to Hamburger Bahnhof and said, what a great experience she'd had. So it might have been quite easy for that invigilator to say, oh, I'm really sorry that that's not going to work. But instead, that invigilator went the extra step to make something happen. And again, just do it, you'll get it right, and you will get it wrong, but do it in the spirit of learning.
Thank you so much.